Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, Chief Marketing Officer for Eckspansion Media and Grammy U mentor, Cherise P. Hey, what you drinking? Okay, guys, this is another foundational conversation because you've heard me talk with friends from my high school. You've heard me talk with some of my mentors. You heard me talk with some of my coaching clients. You know, I've had a tendency to get pretty transparent. But now I'm going to have a conversation with someone who I had the privilege of working with at the very so one of the earlier positions, not the first position that she's had in corporate America, but one of the earlier positions, and certainly one of the earlier management type roles that I had. But she's overcome all the infliction that I applied to her and all the troubles and trials that I put her through, and she's gone on to do amazing things. And she's still talking to me, right? She's still answering my phone calls. So since she answered my last phone call, I said, well, I'm going to seize this opportunity to see if I can get her to be on Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. So with that, I'd like to introduce to my listeners a really, really good friend, a dear friend, Miss Cherise. Cherise, welcome to Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. How are you doing?
I am thankful. I am definitely thankful and happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Galen.
Thank you for relenting, because it was going to get kind of ugly, and I would have been embarrassed if it had taken more for me to get you on this show. So we have a lot to catch up on, because we've talked pretty frequently, but we haven't talked recently in a while. And you have gone on to do not only amazing things for yourself, you're doing amazing things with your family, with your kids. I mean, oh my gosh, just the orbit that you fly in and that you're bringing other folks in is just nothing short of amazing. So I've got a ton of questions. But the first question, and everyone knows that this question is coming, so let me just go ahead and jump into it so we can get started. So what you drinking?
So, to be honest, it might be it might be one of the least exciting of all your guests. I have here my Wake Pray Slay mug, which is one of my favorites. But inside of it is a chemical compound known as hydrogen dioxide. It's H2O. I have water in here because, as we might talk about, I grew up and work in music, and one of the best things for your voice is good old water. And so being on your illustrious podcast, I wanted to bring my best, and this is the best for your water, for your voice.
That's good. That's good. We've had some water drinkers. We've had some repeated water drinkers. I've had a couple of people on for repeat performances, and they've drank water every time. So you are in great company, and that just means that in order to stay with the brand integrity of my show, that means I gotta come with the whiskey. And I put a lot of thought into the whiskeys that I select based upon the connection that I believe that whiskey has to the guest that I'm going to be talking with. And this is a whiskey that many people have heard me talk about before, where when I first found it and fell in love with it, it was a nice whiskey. It was somewhat pricey for my budget back then, but I could afford it. And I bought one bottle and just absolutely loved it. So I went back immediately and bought like 3 more bottles of it just because I loved it. And I drank it. I kept drinking. It was, once a month, twice a month. It was just kind of my thing. And I got down to my next to last bottle and I went back to the store to get some more and I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it anymore. And so I said, well, I'm gonna wait. And I waited another month and I went back to the store and the version that I had been drinking and that I had fallen in love with, they didn't have that anymore. They had moved on to like another version. And I was like, I think I'm going to hold out. I'm going to hold out and wait for what I have been looking for. And finally, I kept waiting. I went to different states. I went to different stores and I couldn't find that version anymore. They had moved on to version 8 and I was drinking version 1. And so finally, about 6 months ago, I looked it up online. And I said, well, there's got to be somewhere in the world where I can buy this whiskey. And when I bought it, I think I paid like $89 for the bottle, which, that's a good, I had to hit in my pocketbook a little bit, $89. And, but when I found this bottle of Blood Oath Pact number 1 online, the only way I could get it is if I were to pay $3,400 for a bottle that I had purchased for $89. So, needless to say, I'm nursing this bad boy. So, this is Blood Oath Pact number 1. I think the only time that I have drank this on the show was when I had my brother and my sister on the show, because there is something about the significance of the name of this. It's Blood Oath. It's an orphan barrel. No, actually, this one is not an orphan barrel. This is just Blood Oath, but it's Pact number 1. This is the original creation. They have moved on to Pact number 8. And like I said, I can't see myself coming off of $3,400. So when this is gone in this house, it'll just be a memory. So I'm going to crack this open. And I'm going to pour me a little bit here. And man, this has got some good memories. Good memories. But I think that this is an outstanding selection for the conversations that we're going to have here and how much I believe you're really going to be able to, through your story, impact and improve the lives of my listeners. So while I enjoy Blood Oath Pact number 1, I'm down. I got like 2.5 inches left in this bottle. So while I enjoy this, please share a little bit about your background, and even go back even before you started coming into your own, because your family history and your family legacy it's the kind of stuff that fables are made of. The first time you shared your story with me, I had to do some research on you because I'm like, okay, clearly, okay. So share a little bit of your story, and I'm going to enjoy this Blood Oath Pact number 1.
Okay. And thank you for letting me come on a rare night, so you got the rare $3,400. With that being said, I'll try to go pretty quick. As far as the family history, on my father's side of the family, right? My great grandmother, Adele, in Alabama, first Black female pastor in Birmingham. And then on my birth mom's side, there's another first female pastor, great aunt on her side. And then on my dad's mom's side, I found out, actually, I don't even think you've heard this, but what I found out is that my paternal great grandfather's family was a long line of like mixed people, right? So I did this whole genealogy. I'm looking at like 1700s and 1800s, and I've seen them living in Kentucky listed as mulatto. And I was like, what in the world are y'all doing in Kentucky? And why are you staying? If you're free enough to be there, you should probably go north into like Ohio, Michigan or something. But it turns out that they were these Melungians. So basically, they were staying and living in the hills of Kentucky when using their freedom to, when people would run or something, you'll hear stories of people running to Appalachia. And it almost isn't intuitive now. But what it is that they would run there and they would have a refuge with these families that were known as free. And what they were doing is they were using the laws of the land to basically like sell each other to their kids and to stay free and in that area at that time. And then so found out they were basically like abolitionists, and that was amazing. Then found out on the other side of that family, the great grandmother, my grandmother, her grandfather had gotten free during the Civil War, 1867, found his wife and his daughter, moved from Virginia to Ohio, became a cook in 1870, and by 1875 had become first Black dentist in Ohio, and became a landowner in a town called Laughlin. And basically, he and the family bought like enough land to have a farm and opened a lunch counter and would have like fireworks and festivities for people of color in that area because they couldn't go to the others because of Jim Crow laws. And so they provided like hot meals for people when they wanted to eat and all this otherness. And my uncle, who lives in Virginia now, where I went to school for college, Hampton, he would work the plow. They didn't have a horse. So that uncle, his name was William Goins, that uncle, who I ended up going to live near for college in Virginia, got strong, became, this strapping young man, very industrious and protective. The family was being protective of the entire community, and decided he wanted to go to the Navy. He ended up becoming the first Black Navy SEAL. And after that, so that's my grandmother's, like her dad's side, and then her mom's dad's side. But on her mom's side, Daniel Hamlin, what I found out was that also during the Civil War, had decided to go be protective and fight for people and join the Union Army. And on his regiment, he was the first in a newly formed portion of our military, the Union, and was the only Black in his battalion. And who could have known? Uncle Billy sure didn't know that almost a century later, almost to the year, really, because this was in the 1860s, that then in the late 1950s, Uncle Billy would heed the call of JFK and would answer the call to join up in serving as one of the first SEALs. So when I say he was the first Black Navy SEAL, he was also on the first SEAL team ever. He and his peers, they co-created. They went through all of the Marines and the Navy and the Air Force offer. And they decided, we're going to, we like this. We want to throw out that. Nobody has that. That became the SEAL program. And then eventually his little sister, my grandmother, she meets my grandfather. They decide that they like each other. And a young man named Kelly Isley introduced them to each other in my grandmother's front yard. And Kelly had some brothers, Rudolph and Ernie. They were the Isley brothers. They were my grandfather's best friends ever since they had been 4 years old. Eventually later, a cousin of a cousin married them into the Jaspers and whatever. And my dad became their percussionist and their drummer at times. Percussionist some shows, drummer other shows. His sister was hanging out with these bass playing folks, and it turns out that King Records was pressing records in the backyard of my grandfather's mother's house. Now, this is the same guy that Kelly introduced him to to my grandmother. This guy named James, last name Brown. They were using his mom's backyard, this lot behind them, to press up James's records. My aunt, their daughter, my dad's sister, ends up, becoming friends with this girl, Malia Franklin, who meets a guy named Bootsy. and introduces Bootsy to this guy named George Clinton. And my aunt Kim ends up going on to sing with Parliament, Funkadelic. And I grew up many Halloweens being dressed in this really shiny outfit and people in a shiny wig. And people say, well, who are you for Halloween? I'm a Funkadelic. But there's been a lot of firsts, is the point. Funkadelic, P-Funk All-Stars, they were the first, I would say, as in many things that they did with music. The Isleys that my dad did go on to play with also have, yes, love music, but they also had protective music with Fight the Power and other songs that they created. And so, and then like there are deacons and pastors, an aunt who recently transitioned. There was a strong aunt, my Aunt Janet. And then my grandmother just kind of hanging out in the middle of it and just being this really sweet, loving person. Went to high school with Nikki Giovanni, her brother, the first Black Navy SEAL, the Isleys, and just being a very just constant force in saying, no matter what kind of glitterati she was friends with or whoever she is around, we're here to love. We're here to love. And she would proudly say, we are encouragers. We are Barnabas people. No matter what gifts Kelly Isley would give her, she would say, well, we're rich in love. That's the point. I'm thankful that he gives me nice things, or that they love us, or that's family. But the number one thing is love. So I hope I did that quick enough.
Wow. How long did it take for you to recognize, appreciate, and own the fact that that is not a normal, average, everyday family story? You know, I'm sure you got a lot of reactions from people saying, really? Really? You know, but for you, it might have been, well, that's just Uncle Billy. I mean, I saw him last month at the cookout, right? How long did it take you to realize that that's not a normal, average, everyday family story that folks have?
I think one of the things is knowing your family's story, right? So many people have amazing greatness in their families that they don't know about to appreciate it. Like, and then there's like cousins that would probably be like, seriously, cuz, you know, like literally like all stars. Like Musin Muhammad is my cousin, Pro Bowler. Norm Richardson, a coach in the NBA right now, G2 League. Derek, NBA player. I mean, there are awesome folks in our family tree, but I think a lot of us don't know our people and where we come from. And then as far as the others, it was a slow burn. Like I knew Uncle Billy was in the Navy when I was little, and then we went to the Smithsonian, the regular Smithsonian. And it was like, oh, that's Uncle Billy's uniform. It wasn't until I was pretty much in college at Hampton that I realized, oh, that was his uniform, you know, and saw his plank on the wall of his house for being a plank owner. When you're the first of something in the Navy, you're a plank owner for it. Many people are plank owners for ships because they were on the first crew. Well, he's a plank owner for the SEALs. And it was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
And not for just being part of the SEALs, but actually for creating the training program for the SEALs. And did I just hear you slip in, Norm Nixon, who's a coach for the G League, Norm Nixon as in Stormin' Norman Nixon?
Norm Richardson.
Oh, Norman Richardson. I was just gonna say, because you slip in these names like that, and I'm like, wait a second, now you're messing with my childhood. So you and I go back a little bit, and we've had a couple of conversations. So I have become used to you having such a strong family that's contributed to the great things that you're working on now, and the passion with which you throw yourself into these projects that you're on. I think you're the perfect person to help me discuss the significance to the name of this podcast. And as I've said on every episode, I chose the name Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership because those are the three things that I like. I enjoy those three things literally. A friend of mine, Mr. Bo Stevens, said, well, Galen, this makes all the sense in the world. That's you, right? So this podcast is you. This is an expression of you. I also like the metaphor, and this is what I ask my guests to help me talk through. So for me, the metaphor of whiskey is the social element of doing what you enjoy with the folks you enjoyed with, kind of your crew. This is your thing with your crew. And even if folks outside of your crew don't understand it, it doesn't matter because this isn't about them, right? So the social element of whiskey. The jazz, the metaphor of jazz is this idea that you've got to get from where you are to where you want to be, even in situations where you don't have sheet music in front of you, where things aren't spelled out. You still got to find a way to get there. Even in situations where there is sheet music in front of you, you've got to put your own flavor to it. You got to put your own style to it because this is your life, and you got to figure out how to do that. And then the metaphor of leadership. And, you know, probably as well as anyone that I've been passionate about this leadership thing literally for an incredibly long time. But the metaphor of leadership is marketing is fun, which you know a lot about marketing. Strategy is incredibly important. But at the end of the day, nothing happens until someone takes that first step and says, we're going to make this thing happen starting right now. And until someone steps in to take that first action, then yeah, we're just talking about it at the barbershop, or we're having a great conversation, but nothing's going to happen until someone steps into the gap of uncertainty and help other people come across. So that's the metaphor from my standpoint. How does that metaphor hold for someone with all these luminaries in their family, with education from Hampton University, and some time with some pretty storied corporate organizations, but still someone who is doing some amazing work, building their own path? Talk to me about how that metaphor fits into some of the success that you had.
I appreciate the question, and I think that honestly, one of the things that that I love is history, and I should be clear, I guess, for paying to my. So now, as you know, I work as a CMO. I work at Eckspansion Media, and that Eckspansion owns hiphoptruth.com, Web3 Daily Press, all these things. But the core of Eckspansion is, expand your horizons. And my kids hear me talk about a verse from Zechariah often, despise not small beginnings. So in the work and doing the work at Eckspansion, I try to remember with myself, my team, with our partners, to your point, like you got to start, right? And as I'm a marketer, that's what I did at Hampton. One of the things that helps me a lot is history. And I love history. I sometimes think maybe I should have been a historian, but I think that time and time again, when we look more closely at the stories of people who we see as larger than life now in history, and who accomplished all these things, or that took bold, courageous moves. One, they were doing, like you said, like who they are. Like that's exactly who they are and who they were, whether they were famous or infamous. They were doing literally just living out this journey, this precious time that we get to be, this condensation of spirit and molecules and awesomeness on this little blue planet. They chose to go hard in it. And as you said, to start, to hit go, not so much to get into analysis paralysis. And, they didn't have the benefit, even many of them, of history to know what had been done before them. They were just really doing, the best that they could with the information that they had. And I think now we're at a point where we've got access to so much information through our phones and our watches and, Google goggles, being in and out of reality as a thing. So just and biometrics barreling its way towards becoming the normal thing in human experience here on Earth, that it almost prevents us from doing exactly what you just said, because we know so much about how things have gone greatly for others and not greatly for some. These stories that we get of people without really learning how they did what they did, and not hearing about their fears and their night terrors, and how many times they almost quit, that we just hear the hunter tells the tale version of it. And many of those folks, when you actually go and read, their stories or their diaries, if they are found, or letters that they wrote, they wouldn't even tell their stories the way that we're getting them. And that's a part of why at Eckspansion, we want to uplift and celebrate and illuminate people who are doing bold and courageous and uplifting work right now in a transparent and meaningful way, because I think that so many folks are clutching their pearls or wanting it to go perfect. And as they say, perfect is the enemy of the good, right? And so that's how I've learned to see things. And the more stories that I learn from either history or being blessed to get to work with some luminaries of our time, I love and get to work with Grammy winner Anthony Hamilton, and he's an amazing, humble person who will tell you quickly, the truth of what he's, undertaking. For a time, I served in Steve Harvey's digital team, and I remember seeing him headed to basically work on his radio show before I worked with him, and it was like really late. He looked really tired because it was like early. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. Like we're at this something else for the music industry, and he's having to go do the radio show. And it's like, that's right. You got to get up at 3 a.m. Or even my friend Nikki Davis, who you've met recently, who is doing an awesome job as a DJ, a celebrated DJ on Boost Radio, will give me the realities of her schedule. And I think that that's like what people don't get. They just see the polished, shiny version that goes out to the web. I'm thankful to work on the board and Eckspansion is a partner working on with Roadies of Color United, which is one of the biggest organizations of tour managers and crew members from all over the world for you think of an artist and their crew, some part of their crew is in there. They got over 2,000 subscribers, all that have 3+ years of touring. You can't just join. You have to have 3+ years of touring, actual days on the road, has to add up to over 600 days, and you have to be referred. And so you end up with really, really high quality people in Rock U, but at the same time, folks that have seen that a show might not go right, seen when oh my goodness, the speakers from XYZ company didn't show up for load in, and they've got to make sausage without the factory right now. So that's what I would say. That growing up backstage, getting to work with some of the people I work with now, I've always been curious. There's been a lot of folks that are successful. I try to ask all of them. Well, I used to ask, how did you get what you got? Like from Mark Cuban to Jamie of Sister Magazine, Jamie Foster Brown, every person in my early 20s, I would ask them, how did you build what you built? And almost every one of them had the exact same answer. And they said, I started. Jamie Foster Brown said, how did I get my magazine? Me and my sister started writing. That's how we got our magazine. And so I think that's a long answer to the question that you asked. But I think that one, if we look at the real stories of those who came before us in history, from the Harriet Tubmans and who are the famous and celebrated to the infamous like Caligula, I've studied both of their stories pretty deeply, and they were literally doing who they were and dealing with their circumstances, their family backgrounds, their illnesses, whether we think it's right or wrong, they were hitting go every single day. Rome wasn't built in a day, but they were laying bricks every hour. And then the same thing, I would say, for those that we think are doing things so easily now. One of Cardi B's team members told me that for a long time, she did her own social media. And I mean, like, you would have thought that, because the way the content would come out, you would have thought that she had this huge crew of folks doing it and working on her tour. He saw that at a pretty developed part of her career, she was still doing it herself, not because she couldn't hire someone, but that was how she wanted to approach it. So I think that we just kind of get into, it has to be this, and I have to have this manager, and I have to have all these things. And it's like, no, hit go and go with what you have, use what you have in your hand. And if you're great at something, rock that out.
I love that. I love that. Just get started, right? Be prepared to do it bad. I was just watching a story about how Steven Tyler, the front man for Aerosmith, I mean, rock legend, and supposedly they would once a week, he would assemble all of his band members, and they would have a be prepared to suck session, where their goal was to bring all the terrible ideas that they had that were just absolutely terrible, that they were convinced were terrible. They would bring it to the table and they would talk about all these bad ideas. And the story goes that most of the ideas were absolutely terrible, right? Most of the song ideas were absolutely terrible. 8 out of 10 of them were just laughable. But every now and then you would get an idea, we should make a song that is around, dude looks like a lady, right? And that becomes an anthem for a generation. But it's just this area of this idea, to your point, of just getting started, just hitting go. I have said a couple of times that I believe that college education, as well as advanced degrees, for most people, not for everyone, but for most people, really only teach you all the reasons why things won't work, right? And that's where you get into your analysis paralysis, because I know all these reasons why this thing can't work. But then you got the Bill Gates of the world who didn't finish college. And so he doesn't know all the reasons why things won't work. So he just got started and he did it, right? So there's a question that there's a topic, there's a story that I always think about when I think of you. And so here's this opportunity for me to replay that story live time, because you told me this story very early on in our relationship, very early on in our working relationship, and was about Uncle Billy. And you said, I think you said that there was something that was happening in the world, and there was a news bulletin that flashed across the screen, and everyone was sitting around and glued to the television, and they were thinking, oh my God, that's crazy. That sounds like something Uncle Billy should probably be involved with. And you looked around and Uncle Billy was gone. And he was somehow involved in something, but just in that hot second between hearing it and seeing it, Uncle Billy had vanished. Was that folklore, or did I remember that? Did I remember that right?
To be clear, like I went to Hampton for 4 years, and he's been my uncle my whole life, and we're close. Like, I adore him. Like, we talk almost every day, especially lately. So as far as which exact story it might have been, there's a bunch of them. But what I will say is that we grew up thinking really early out that he was just in the Navy, because he's so humble, and still is. Like, even literally, he wasn't feeling well the other day, and somebody said, oh, and I just kind of happened to mention it, like Living Life. And they said, oh, I know I don't know him, but would it be okay if I sent him a card? And I said, let me check, so I call him and say, hey, how do you want this to be handled? Because somebody wants to send you a card, but you don't know them. And he said, oh, just give him, give him my address. And I said, really? And I'm thinking that, and he said, we get mail from all over the country, like all the time. We get, from admirals, from, generals, from people who are interested in going into the Navy or going into the SEALs. And now this is this year. And I'm like, how am I still learning things about you? I basically lived with you for years, and I'm still learning things about you. And so what I will say is that there are things through books that other people have written that I may have had some kind of, like, that seemed, strange or weird, or it was hard to get a hold of him at that point or something, or whatever. And then it kind of went through books or information that other people have put out. It's like, oh, that's something that, he was involved with, or things that had been like declassified that say that, oh, that, SEAL Team 2 went to, serve for that, or did this, or handled whatever from a specific thing. He's always been very humble. He doesn't as inquisitive as some of us, maybe he's not quick to share anything. He's really big on, you don't become a SEAL for parades. So you don't, become a SEAL to share, war stories or big fish stories, of what you did, that you join, you become one to serve. And there have been, times where I may say, oh, I think I want to, I really want to go to Israel, right? That's a thing. That's been a thing for my whole life, or I may want to go to this, to, I don't know, Morocco or Ireland or wherever. And I may, say, hey, I think I, really want to go this or that and the other. He'll just kind of, oh, darling, I think, you just stay with me that week or whatever. But he's not going to, say
Right.
something's going on, or that's about as close as I get. Or you may look up and, like, is he not back yet?
Yeah.
But other than that, he tries really hard, I would say, to keep it a pretty normal existence at home and for those he loves. And he's just more than anything a really super loving, funny, sweet uncle. But he loves this country, and I think he's done over 600 jumps. Maybe 300 or 600. I get it confused, from airplanes. He let me come to Hampton and have all my excitement of what I wanted to do. And I found out recently that he had been asked to speak on campus several times. And instead of giving me the tour and saying, well, I spoke in this building and that building, he let his niece go on and on about, oh, Uncle, I heard that the school does this and I heard they offer that. And it's like, yeah.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.